Hi, this is Mike Chen, and you're listening to the FSF Podcast.
The show that made you just want to sit alone in a room without any other voices. Like ever.
Except for the ones that are in your head, right? Everybody else has those.
Those are always there.
Do you speak English? Our show is brought to you by our charity sponsor, the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund, which supports the Wish Upon a Teen Foundation that helps out sick kids when they need it most. And just imagine the comfort you'll give Red Shirt crewman number 152. He'll know that when he puts on the red shirt and joins Obi-Wan and Anakin in their adventures of building a brotherhood, that he didn't leave his family destitute and without hope, because the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund has his back, and what's left of the high ground.
All right, guys, our guest today is a New York Times best-selling author who has written in the worlds of both Star Wars and Star Trek, amongst other nerdiverses. But he's also done some work for Fox Sports, doing some hockey reporting back in the day. And as a hockey fan, I can't wait to talk to him a little bit about that. There's the Red Wings. Ta-da! Anyway, there you go. We are so happy. Nice. We are so happy to welcome Mike Chen to the FSF Podcast. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hello, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the hockey talk right now, too.
I'm trying to think of what other hockey stuff I have nearby. I've got my comic book signed by Darren McCarty next to me.
Oh, nice.
Oh, you know what? Let's tell you what. Let's just jump right into the hockey talk because we're already talking it, so we might as well. So, as you can see by what's on my wall, I am a lifelong Detroit Red Wings fan. And when I was looking through your website, I got excited because I was like, I clicked on other writings, and I saw this thing about proof. You so wonderfully provided proof, rather, that you were a Fox Sports writer at one point. And I was like, oh, he wrote about hockey. So I had to go find some of your hockey stuff. And so I was really excited to know about that. So my question here is, after all that awesome preemptive rambling I just did, was knowing that I'm a Red Wings fan. My favorite player has always been and will always be Darren McCarty. I need to know, I think, because you already held it up. What's your team, San Jose, and who's your favorite player?
Oh, so you're going to get mad at my favorite player. But so I grew up a Chicago Blackhawks fan.
Okay.
So I was born in, I grew up in the 80s. I started watching hockey like about 2 years before the Sharks came into existence. And it was because they were on Sports Channel. Like the NHL was on Sports Channel, and I just found it, and I was like, this is amazing. And I dropped baseball completely. Like I was a really big, because I grew up in the Bay Area. I still live in the Bay Area. Sure. And I was a really big San Francisco Giants fan. And then I just discovered hockey. And then the first Sega Genesis NHL hockey came out. I think it was the season before the Sharks came into existence. So when I discovered it on cable TV, and then I started playing it on Sega Genesis, and I started collecting the Upper Deck cards, and then the Sharks came here. I stayed a Blackhawks fan because I like the Blackhawks. That was like peak Jeremy Roenick years. So I was a Blackhawks fan mostly because of Roenick, Chelios, and Belfour. And then awesome trio. When they had like their pretty famous ownership issues where Bill Wirtz was just like, I'm not going to sign anyone. I'm not going to put my team's games on TV. And it was when they let Tony Amani go, that was like, okay, that's it. I'm done with this team. I live in the Bay Area. The Sharks were my number 2 team. They have been elevated to my number 1 team, even though they were still horrible at that time. That was like right before Daryl Sutter took over the team and brought them back to respectability. So yeah, I was actually, this past year is like the first season that since 2001 that we've finally canceled our season tickets. And it's solely because I would go with my dad. My dad is pushing in his late 70s now. Okay. And my wife has a medical condition, so I can't really go to mass events for like COVID purposes. So it's like between my wife and my dad, I'm like, and the fact that you can get tickets anywhere now, it's like, So it's like the whole purpose of holding season tickets doesn't just really matter that much anymore. But I look forward to the world stabilizing so I can take my daughter. We actually play hockey, like we play ball hockey, me and my 8-year-old daughter. And and I miss playing hockey. I played every week for about, I think, 15 or 17 years, both ice and roller. Like the first thing I did when I got a job out of college and I had money was to, because I played roller hockey
Right.
since middle school, but I always wanted to play ice. And so the
Mhm.
first thing I did with my money was like buy ice gear and take like hockey lessons. The most important thing is learning to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's pretty similar to roller
Yeah.
hockey, and like the weight of the puck is different. But yeah,
Right.
I miss playing. And so, my favorite player of all time is not a San Jose Shark. It is a Colorado Avalanche. It is Peter Forsberg. I'm
Yeah.
sure you hate him.
Well, it was nice talking to Mike Chen, but we got to go.
It could have been worse. It could have been worse.
I will say, okay, so in college, I
Wow.
went to school at UC Davis. My so my best friend is also a Shark season ticket holder and everything. Like I grew up with him. We roomed together. We converted our other two roommates into gigantic hockey fans. Like one of them was, he didn't really watch sports before hockey, and now he still plays every week. But the other one was a huge baseball guy, and he just kind of expanded into hockey. He became this gigantic Detroit Red Wings fan. He had like signed photos of Steve Yzerman on his wall. He had this
That guy I
framed
like.
photo. He had this framed photo of the Darren McCarty like this over the turtling Claude Lemieux. And it was like,
See, like I said, it could have been worse. He said Forsberg, not Lemieux. It's okay.
That's right. I did like the ESPN documentary on the two that came out like 6 months ago or something.
That was very cool.
Stuff.
A McCarty book.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Blood Feud book too. That was a really fun
yeah.
read.
Signed by Darren.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. That was cool. That was I got that as he came to, my wife works at a university here in Michigan, and he came as during one of the hockey games to do a promotional event. And that was the first time, but we always, because their school that she works for, it's Division 3 or 2 rather in football and basketball, everything else, but it's Division 1 for hockey. And so that's kind of cool. So I mean, we always had big teams coming in, and we had scouts there all the time. And I'd go sit down and talk with the scouts, and because it's a small arena. I mean, I think max seating is somewhere between 2,250 and 2,500 people. So, nice.
They're both signed.
I didn't even know about those.
They are really cool. They're both signed by Darren as well as the author of the comic.
Are those by Mess Bucket?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Mess Bucket comics. Those are cool. So he came in to do a promotion of his book, and I had to laugh because my son and I were both very excited. My wife had this thing, and there's the Red Wings. You can't really see it very well behind me, but there's a Red Wings charity softball game every year, and they have different baseball jerseys made every year for it. And I have one of them behind me, and that's what I had Darren sign as well.
That's cool.
And so he signed that, and that was part of my anniversary gift, was to meet Darren McCarty and talk with him, which was cool because a couple years later, we got to interview Darren McCarty, and we've met him a couple different times. Last time we saw him was at Monroe Pop Fest here in Michigan, and he's like, "Hey, when am I coming back on your show?" I'm like, "Tomorrow's fine. We could do tomorrow. Tomorrow.
That's awesome.
You want to?
But so I mean, we've had like Chris Draper and Chris Chelios there, and up at in Big Rapids, we've had a lot of different guys, and it's just been really cool. When Chelios was there, he was there to watch his sons play for Michigan State. So it was really hard to root against his kids, but I was like, I'm like, I like you, Mr. Chelios. Your kids, they're kind of pissing me off right now. Because these kids were really good
players, though.
Yeah, these kids were really good. So, but anyway,
it is cool though in Michigan because you have Red Wings are they have been such a solid team. They've had some issues, obviously, but then with Red Wings and then having Grand Rapids Griffins in the AHL, and they have all of like they put their seedling players there, and they plant their little seedling players in Grand Rapids. It's kind of cool. You get this. Tim doesn't like hockey at all.
Just a little bit.
But I mean, we've got there's how many? There's a lot of hockey teams other than just the colleges too, because there's Kalamazoo Wings are OHL?
Oh, you have
Well,
junior teams, right?
Well,
We have
right, and you
junior
got
teams.
junior
Yeah.
teams in both Flint and Saginaw.
Yeah, we got the Flint
for
Firebirds and Saginaw Spirit,
for
which
the
are both
OHL,
ECHL.
OHL,
Are you sure?
positive. And then ECHL is
Kalamazoo ECHL?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
It's been a long.
And then there's Toledo Walleye, and which is also part of the Red Wings organization, and so it's really kind of cool. You have all this hockey nearby us and all these things. So yeah, so when I saw that you were a hockey fan, I'm like, well, we got to talk a little bit of hockey. And
The draft coming up and the Sharks with the number 4 pick. I mean, like my hockey buddies, like we have an ongoing text thread, and it's basically just this argument for the past 2 weeks about who do you take at number 4, and also like what can we get for Erik Karlsson? That's like all my phone is right now.
that sounds like text messages between my son Nolan and I, because we'll message back and forth about the draft and everything. And I have to say, for the last 3 years in the draft, we have been 100% wrong. Everybody that we thought we would take in the first round, or the first 2 rounds rather, Steve Yzerman has pulled a draft pick out of his back pocket, and I don't think anybody has seen coming for the last couple of years. But they've all worked out. They've been wonderful drafts, and so yeah, I trust in the Yzer plan. So I got to just sit down and shut up and say he clearly knows more than me. So
that's what I try to remember that with all of the. I mean, even when I was covering the NHL, I kind of like prided myself on like taking a very like emotion-free approach, like not in like I don't care about the game. So I covered the league in general for Fox Sports. I had like my own blog where I kind of expanded on the stuff that I would write about in Fox Sports, or just use like kind of more of a sense of humor approach. I managed the SB Nation general NHL site, but I also wrote for their Sharks site for a while too. And so I tried to like, I would always really care, especially when I was writing like the pro Sharks stuff. But I tried to be like, this is kind of like my approach. This does tie into writing too. This is my approach to writing in like how I watch hockey. It's very analysis based. And so when in the early 2000s, when analytics was really starting to ramp up in hockey, it was like, this is perfect for my math-based brain. Like it totally fits. And so I was trying not to like, it always pissed me off because like I would always sit next to like the dudes who had the seats behind me were like your guy gets checked and then they're like, punch the other guy in the face. I'm like, no, don't do that. That's a penalty. We don't want to go on the penalty. Like that sort of thing. But like I would kind of translate that sort of like almost dispassionate analytical way of watching hockey into the stuff that I wrote. And when I write books, like my books are very character driven, but the craft of processing them is very methodical and very like, I do say it's like almost numbers based, because I think about like the pacing, the structure. I structure everything in advance. I know like I try to think about like the amount of word count that like a proper emotional beat is going to have versus like breaking down like an action scene, and like trying to think of like how long or how short to stay with a character, like that sort of stuff. It is very analytical based, and it all kind of, my wife is like, oh yeah, this is the person that I married, the one who's always thinking about numbers and like solving problems and being constructive. It's like whether I'm writing about hockey or like when I was playing in bands and like when I would write music, it's the same thing. And like right now I'm teaching my daughter to play guitar, and I'm like, it's all numbers. Like the way that like you're structuring everything together is all numbers. So that's my diatribe.
It's like talking to my husband. Oh my word. My husband does the same thing. Everything is numbers. I'm like, how? How do you?
Does he have an engineering degree too?
No, no. But he is a forever GM in multiple tabletop RPGs. So sort of.
He also has a very analytical mind who likes to dive into. He likes to dive into things and dissect it and see how this affects that to affect that. And I love having him when he does come on camera, because he doesn't do it all that often. But I do love it when he does come on camera, because he's usually got some points he wants to make, and they're usually very well thought out. And like,
he's kind of cool.
did you recognize how this attaches to this and how that affects that? And he can really have some cool insights on how something gets broken down. So
Yeah, it's funny though. It's just like anytime I have a problem and he'll start like dissecting into the numbers of it, and I'm like, oh my word, brain does
I
not
like him
compute.
already.
He's pretty great.
He's
But
all
talking
right.
about your writing, we are recording this on June 23rd, but yesterday, June 22nd, you shared on your Instagram and Twitter that you're going to be working on a new Marvel What If novel that dives into what would happen if Mark Spector, Moon Knight, hosted the Venom symbiote, which
I know,
is
it's
so
such a cool pitch.
is so
that
cool.
is so cool.
So without giving anything away, violating any
there's not much to give away because I've just started writing it. So.
or violating any NDAs.
Right.
What sort of inspiration are you drawing to build that story? Because Mark already having his own issues with dissociative identity disorder, I can't imagine that adding Venom's voice into his mind is going to make things better.
So, what I will say about the story right now, so Marvel, the Marvel editorial team approached me with that pitch of, what if Mark hosts Venom, and some bigger details. I think it's not a secret that this series will be interconnected in a way. So I got some very loose pieces like that, but they've spent most of their editorial time on the first 2 books in the series so far. So then they kind of left me with that, and they're like, give us a pitch for how you want to approach this. And I'm like, Mark, Steven, Jake, Khonshu, Venom. That's a lot of voices to put together in one person for a narrative. And like not a visual narrative like the Moon Knight TV show, but like a prose narrative. So I think we're pretty happy with the. I can't say too much.
I understand. Yeah, we don't want to push for details.
We came up with something, or I pitched something that I think works really well to give a proper narrative arc to, and treating the different identities as characters on their own.
Awesome.
And it was, when they sent me that pitch, like my reaction was like literally like reading it and saying out loud, "Holy shit." I told that to my wife and she did the same thing. It's such an out there but awesome idea.
It's fantastic.
So we're really early on. It doesn't come out until like next October. I've like only written like 10% of it. And I wrote an outline. But what I can say right now, if you want to get ahead of like the narrative influences of it, check out the 2016 Moon Knight series, and then the 2018 Venom run. And those are kind of like the tonal inspirations for it.
Okay, cool.
And then obviously the Oscar Isaac series.
Right. Oh man, that's gonna be so cool.
I was telling someone yesterday that like for research, I have literally Googled Oscar Isaac hair and just like looked at pictures of his hair and thinking about how to describe it. It's a hard job.
It is. It is a hard job.
That is a very cool job though. Because I think we on our side of the camera, we all had the same reaction. I think when we saw that announcement, I'm like, oh, that's gonna be awesome.
Oh man.
Yeah.
There's so much fun that can be had with the what if on that, especially because Mark does have like 72 voices in his head already, and then you get one that's really off the chains like Venom, and that's just gonna, oh man, that could be so much fun. So we don't want to push for details, but that is really cool.
Yeah, we had to figure out the logistics because it's like, if it's hard to tell a story when it's just like a bunch of arguments in some dude's head. So we had to come up with some creative solutions for it. But I think it works. I think the outline I think is really solid. I just have to write it. That's the challenge right now.
Fair
we
enough.
look forward to it because that does sound like so much fun.
Yeah, we're excited for you, and we're excited to be able to get it in our hands. So. All right, so talking about other things that you have written and we can talk in depth about because they're published, they're out there.
Yes.
And there's, less chance of violating NDAs. Anyway, So having written in both the Star Wars and the Star Trek universes, I have to think that you have a level of fandom for both sides of the fence in the Star Wars versus Star Trek debate. And although I'm not going to ask you what side you plant your flag on, or if you do, I am curious as to what sparked your interest level in writing for both, and what do you enjoy writing about those universes in, separately?
Well, so I'll put it this way. I grew up a Star Wars fan. And so it's basically been in my blood my entire life. I mean, like there's photos of me at 2 years old with like a Tauntaun toy from like 1981. I guess it would be 3 then. But like I remember one of my core early memories is being in Kmart in San Jose and being in the toy aisle and Han Solo's blaster and like the way the blaster sounds like I don't know what the mechanism was inside the blaster, like it made this weird wheezing noise. It was like wah! I just remember playing with that in the toy aisle of Kmart at the time. And I would like make my own X-Wings out of Legos and stuff. So it was like when the Thrawn trilogy came out in the early 90s, not for the first book, but for the second book, I was able to drive, and my buddy and I drove to Walden Books, and they had like a release party, which for at their time was they rolled a TV in like 80s school style and put the original trilogy on their VHS player. There was no signing or anything like that. That's just all they did. So yeah, Star Wars has always been in my life. Like with the prequels, like I was there, opening night for all of them, lined up all day. I miss that actually. I miss that kind of process of it. With Trek, my dad is a big original series fan. He didn't really like Next Gen, but he watched all of it. And so like I wasn't really into it. Like I knew it because I saw it all the time. And like I went to go see the movies in the theaters with him and everything. I still don't really like the original series cast that much, except for Spock. I like them in the movies. I like the Kelvin universe, Kirk. I love Strange New Worlds. But it was like really Next Gen. Like when I finally gave that a chance, like it really, really spoke to me. I just like I had to get to the point where I gave it a chance. And that wasn't until I was probably in my late teens or so. And then when I met my wife, so I actually watched Deep Space Nine when it was in syndication, and then also like on sci-fi reruns. And then my wife, when I met her, she's a huge Next Gen fan and Voyager fan. And so when we got together, it was like, this is before streaming. So it was just like whenever it was on, we would just like leave it on. And it became very like synthetic, or not synthetic, but it's synthesized into our lives as we came together. So it's just both of them represent something very different, I think, in my life. Kind of like how they represent different parts of storytelling. So I don't plant a flag on one side or another. I love them equally. I kind of joke that like the holy trinity of science fiction, at least for us, is like Doctor Who, Star Trek, and Star Wars.
100%. I agree.
Excellent trinity.
Like, as I've got my Chekhov Funko, I've got my Star Wars Funkos, I've got my Doctor Who print. I agree. Like, my TARDIS sweatshirt
my
behind
Mass
me.
Effect stuff. So, oh yeah, I see your TARDIS on your
my
chair.
TARDIS sweatshirt. It's my sweatshirt. It's just thrown over the back of my chair. But
I think it's interesting though, Mike, that you mentioned that your affinity for different levels of Star Trek, and I too grew up as a Star Wars only fan. No, not only fans. Let's be clear here.
Star Wars only fans could be funny though.
You're not wrong. I think that could be highly entertaining, but that's a whole nother podcast.
I'm sure there are some people who
there's got to be
that way.
there's something for everybody out there, I'm sure. But what I meant is I was only watching Star Wars as a kid because I didn't like the original series. I didn't like the actors. I really only liked Spock and maybe Bones. And past that, it was kind of like, you guys, especially Kirk, really got on my nerves. I like movie Kirk. I like movie Kirk. I don't like I don't like the original series Kirk. Movie Kirk to me is it's a whole different tone, a whole different thing. And movie Kirk I like. But I only recently got involved in the last 2 years into Star Trek, and it was because of Strange New Worlds. If it really hadn't been for Strange New Worlds, I wouldn't have gone back. And I tried pushing I got through to a certain point in watching the original series, and I was like, okay, I had my fill of Kirk. He's in every episode. I'm moving on, and I'm into I'm into Next Generation now, and very much enjoying that, and looking forward to watching Enterprise and Voyager and DS9 and all these things, Discovery, all these other shows that I haven't watched yet. So
I often try to lobby people to watch DS9, and my pitch is that it is the greatest TV show ever made. Like, and the fact that it was made, the story, like the serial story that it contains, the fact that it was made for syndication in the 90s, and with a black lead is just kind of a miracle in itself.
Yeah.
And like, when you get to DS9, my strategy is there's a watch guide on, I think it's on Gizmodo, and it's to get to the serial arc of the story. I said, like, start with that, because season 1 does start slow. It's like, it's all Trek starts kind of poorly in season 1. So use the watch guide for the serial story, and then it really hits its stride around season 3. And by the time you get there, so it condenses it down from like 24 to 26 seasons or episodes per season, to like each season, I think they have between like 10 or 15 episodes to watch. So it's kind of paced like modern TV. By the time you get to season 3, you will love this crew. So then you have a choice about, do you want to go back and just enjoy the other 30 or 40 episodes that you have not seen to get up to that point, or do you want to continue with the serial story, finish that, and then when you're done and you're heartbroken that it's over, oh wait, you've got like 75 bonus episodes for you to enjoy. And I think it's like
brilliant watch
I think about, like, with modern series now, like, you're contained to like 10 episodes per season, and then it's over, and you're like, what do I do now? And this is almost like a backdoor strategy to kind of deal with that. Like, you can watch DS9 like the proper story, and then you have like DS9 the standalone shenanigans, and you just get to enjoy it for another year on top of that.
I would actually do that. That sounds like a lot of fun, to be able to watch the show in that order. And I like the idea of the story's done, but bonus content.
Exactly. It's like a DLC for a game.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
I might have to do that watch through. I mean, I've seen DS9 more times than I can count, but I might have to try it with that watch through.
That's actually how, like, so when the pandemic hit, and we were like, what are we going to do? We can't, go out, especially during like the first year. And so my wife, her Trek blind spot was always DS9. Like, I had always said, like, we should watch it sometime. I promise you will love it. My Trek blind spot was always Voyager. Like, I had seen a handful of episodes of Voyager. Like, I'd seen Enterprise. We were watching Discovery at the time. But Voyager was just the one that I never got to. And so we did a swap. So we did Voyager first, using that same thing where we did a watch guide to of how they got through the Delta Quadrant, and then we just went back and started watching random episodes, and then we did DS9 that way too. And it was just, it kept us busy every night for like a year, and it was just a really lovely thing. And now it's like, when we don't have a new episode or a movie or a game or something, we're just like, we'll just put on a DS9 or a Voyager. Like, just pick a random episode and have fun with it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of Star Trek in my house.
There is a lot of Star Trek, just in general. But
yes.
So I was actually going to ask you about why you thought that DS9 was the greatest TV show ever made, but I totally agree with what you said, with it being in the 90s and having a black lead. Like, that was huge. And then going from DS9 to Voyager with now suddenly it's a female captain. Like,
we take these things for granted now.
We do.
But it was like, I remember like much more so like the Janeway controversy, where it was like just so many people who are like, I don't know if I could take orders from a woman. I'm like, what? and like, we just, now it's just a given. And I really love how like there's been like this resurgence, not a pun intended, for Star Trek Resurgence, which is an amazing game and a really great like 10-hour interactive experience. I highly recommend it. But it's been great to see like there's a resurgence for like Janeway in pop culture, through
Mhm.
Prodigy, and I think people just realizing that how awesome Kate Mulgrew is. And so it's really nice to see these things kind of like come back around. I feel very, very much that way, like pivoting to Star Wars about Hayden Christensen. I am so glad that everyone is like, wait a minute, not only was he
Right?
a good actor, he's a super nice guy, and we should celebrate that.
It's not
Yeah,
his fault that the writing sucked.
that's
I,
on George Lucas.
Yeah, I am a huge prequel defender, obviously, but I always, I will admit there are plenty of its faults with it, and like I just wish, particularly with Attack of the Clones, I figure like that one is really like 50% of a really good movie and 50% of a like this is a first draft, George. Can you please let me
Yeah.
polish your script?
There are definitely some things in the prequels where it's the why did they let him write dialogue?
Yeah, yeah, and like even when he admits that is like it's not his strength, I do remember like my facts, like the specifics of this could be wrong, but I believe there was someone who he had offered to write. Like I know he offered Spielberg to direct, and I think
Mhm.
it's Bob Zemeckis that he offered to write, and both of them turned him down, and they're like, "This is your baby, you have to do this." And
So we
so
blame
like
them. Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
in some alternate universe, it's funny. I rewatched The Phantom Menace about actually just this past weekend with my daughter, and she's 8, and she's watched it before. Like we introduced Star Wars to her when she was 5, and so like I've seen it off and on. Um, but like really her sweet spot right now is the Mandalorian, like and
Mhm.
what
Hmm.
was Clone Wars, but we've moved on to Rebels. Like Rebels is our family viewing right now, which is just a joy to actually have.
Mhm.
But I rewatched The Phantom Menace and I was like, this is an excellent kids fantasy movie. Like taking myself out of like my and I really enjoyed it when it came out in '99. I remember I was like really confused why people were pissing on it, and then like I think maybe after I got it on VHS, then I was like, oh, I can see like the technical issues with some of like the dialogue or whatever. But from the very beginning, I found the world building of the Phantom Menace just really really fascinating. I think that's where my
Hmm.
love of the prequels really comes from. But then rewatching it just with my daughter this past weekend, and I was like, this is a great fantasy movie. I'm like, yeah, Jar Jar's kind of annoying, but I think I've become so desensitized to him that I'm like, I'm endearing. Like I find him really endearing now. Same with Jake Lloyd's performance, and it's just like and then Qui-Gon Jinn, who's basically became my favorite character. Like the instant I saw him,
Mhm.
he's got such a like comforting father figure presence in every
Yeah.
Yes.
one of his scenes, and like if for you can hate on every other element of the Phantom Menace, and I tend to understand it. I do not get anyone, particularly from like late '90s, early 2000s criticism, where they said that Liam Neeson gave a really boring performance, and I'm like, are you seeing the same character as me? Because
No, they
Qui-Gon
were
Jinn
watching.
brings so much gravity to every single thing he says.
They were
Anyway,
clearly
that's
watching
my
a. They were clearly watching a different movie.
yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah. Liam Neeson was not the issue in
Yeah.
anything in that movie. I've see. So when that movie first came out, I hated it. It was appalling to me, mostly because of Jar Jar.
Because you're a
Um,
cranky old man.
I am now. Yeah.
You
Uh,
were then.
not really. Um, shush. Anyway, get off my lawn. Anyway, but I've come around to it very much so, and I've actually very much enjoyed the Phantom Menace now because I also look at it through the he was supposed to be Darth Jar Jar lens, and that actually makes this makes it a much better story for me because all the things that he does, all of the clumsiness and the way that he gets himself involved in all these different things in the right place and the right time, it just makes me feel like that was actually supposed to be a thing, and George backed off of it because of the backlash. And whether that's true or not, I mean, there's a million and one conspiracy theories out there, and I would love to be able to sit, like Ahmad Best down and ask him someday, or the man himself, you know, uh, George, and just talk about it, but but that helped me. Now, if I could get somebody to recreate the Attack of the Clones, or at least edit it a little bit differently, cut that whole Naboo Lakeside, I love you, no, I love you, no, I love you section out, and add in a longer Battle of Geonosis section, I think you have a solid movie.
I feel like everything with Detective Obi-Wan is stellar. Like, do not touch any of it. I love all of that. I love the clone army. I love Dooku and Obi-Wan like talking, like when Obi-Wan is captured. Like to me, like the editing is really kind of clunky in that movie. And I remember like I think Ben Burt edited it, and it's like the only movie that he's ever edited. He's a sound guy. And I remember thinking, like, when I watched the documentary that came with it, I was like, that's a very odd choice, because this is not a simple, straightforward movie. This is a very, very complex movie with multiple plot lines and like
many moving parts. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I remember thinking that was really, really odd. What I try to do as an author, though, like, because like if I could quantum leap back into George Lucas or someone working at Lucasfilm circa, like, I guess they would be making it about 2000 for 2002 release. I would love to quantum leap into like his primary assistant and just like script doctor like half the scenes in that. But what I did try to do when I was writing Brotherhood was try to put myself in like the reality of the moment, and like just treating it as like, okay, this is a real event that happened. Like Attack of the Clones is like a historical like documentary. So Anakin and Padme did say these things to each other. So let me get in their heads and then figure out like, why would Anakin say that? Like, what was his intention? And so I addressed it directly in Brotherhood as like, he thinks back on it as like kind of being embarrassed by how uncool he was, but he just blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. And treating it like in the sand thing, I think the sand thing, like, as a parent, as someone who's hated sand his entire life, I can really, really empathize with that, but so much more so now as a parent. But I tried to lean into the idea that, like, what does that line actually represent? And you have a slave boy who grew up on a desert world, and this horrible substance is everywhere, ruining everything. And then you have, this person who grows up in like politics and royalty and wealth. Everything on her planet is green and immaculate. So that line, I don't like sand, is Anakin basically saying, like, I don't like where I came from. I want to be like you. I wish my life was like yours. I want you and your life. So taking that and then building that into Anakin's thoughts, because I've read a lot of Star Wars books, but I don't think I've read all of them for sure. And I know that it's generally not like the tight point of view that I use in each chapter, where I stick only with one character in their head, all their thoughts, all their feelings. That's not typically used. There's a little bit more distance, a little bit more roaming around. But I wanted to take advantage of that. And basically, I want the reader to empathize and just really care about Anakin Skywalker when they finish my book. And so part of that was to take these really clunky moments from Attack of the Clones and ground them in the reality of those, like, and thinking about, what is the intention behind saying something? What is the context behind those thoughts? What drove him to feel that way? And then present it in a way that is a little bit more palatable for the reader. I will say, having lived in Anakin Skywalker's head for a year, I love Attack of the Clones now. Like, on a technical perspective, I still think some of the editing is choppy, and I question like some of the way some of it was cut together. But I like Anakin and Padme. I have so much empathy for them as people now. Part of it is also the building and work that Queen's Hope and E.K. Johnston's trilogy did. And obviously Clone Wars, like, even before I became a Star Wars author, I would defend the prequels to my friends. And I would say, like, after seeing Clone Wars, I can't separate that. And their argument would be like, well, you shouldn't need a 7-season TV show to make your trilogy movie better. And I'm like, yeah, that's true, but also I can't undo it. you know?
Right.
So it's like, to me, it's the synthesis of just like this massive story. And so I think Anakin is extremely compelling. He's so complex. He's put in a no-win situation basically his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And so
absolutely.
I have so much empathy for him. And the other thing is, like, I have always been Hayden Christensen's like a defender of his performance, because I feel like everyone always kind of zeroed in on, like, the monotone speak that he would have with Obi-Wan, and I'd be like, no, wait, watch what he does. Like, when he's around Padme in Attack of the Clones, he's much looser. Like when
Mm-hmm.
they're on that field together, like, Hayden sounds like a normal person. He doesn't, he doesn't have that flat
Right.
demeanor. And I'm like, this is a conscious choice about, submitting to the rules versus I am finally allowed to be who I am. And when you put someone with that much pressure, of course they're going to snap, especially if they grew up a slave and were not allowed to talk
Mm-hmm.
about their feelings and their mom was murdered in front of them.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is something that is so frequently missed by Star Wars fans, is the actual reason that Anakin did what he did, the downfall of Anakin, the rise of Vader, why that split happened, why that, I mean, it's all trauma based when you look at it from
Yeah,
a mental
exactly.
health standpoint.
But that's why you need the Clone Wars right there, because the
It
Clone
is.
Wars shows that gradual descent to becoming Vader. You get to see that mental breakdown, the emotional breakdown, the tremendous weight that was placed on Anakin Skywalker's
Yeah.
shoulders for a very young man with a troubled background. That was
It's
I don't
exactly why Clone Wars shouldn't be referred to as a kids show.
exactly.
I go back to, like, the arguments that I would have with my friends who, and they've come around on it, but when they would say, like, I don't get Anakin's descent, and I'm like, well, think about it this way: you grew up in, like, terrible environment. They take you away from your mom. They tell you you can't talk about your feelings. Just basically shut up and learn. And then you have your cool uncle who says, you can always talk to me, but it turns out he's the most evil person in the world. And he's like saying, trust me, trust me, trust me. While the people
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to trust are saying, like, let's just not talk about it. Also, you are the chosen one who will save all of us. And also, we don't care if your wife dies.
No
So,
pressure though.
yeah, it's like, when you put him in that circumstances, it's just like he's pulled apart
Mm-hmm.
in every possible direction, and he just needs, like, one little nudge in the right direction. To I often get asked, like, if Qui-Gon lived, do I think that Anakin wouldn't have turned? And my answer to that is, I don't think Qui-Gon would have lived. I think Palpatine would have found a way to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, whether before the Clone Wars or during the Clone Wars, but, like, a way to take, like, the only person who shows proper empathy to Anakin, like, Palpatine would eliminate him as soon as
Mm-hmm.
possible.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He would not have made it to a certain age, to be able to watch him to grow, because he needed to remove that father figure from Anakin's life. That had to be gone.
Yeah.
And even though Obi says, you were my brother, Anakin, there was definitely a line there where it was master apprentice, even though there was some camaraderie, there was definite love between the two, but it wasn't a true brotherly love. It was I love you as my apprentice. And there's a big difference there when you say those things.
And I feel too that the Obi-Wan's love for Anakin was, so much of it was just out of duty, with the, I promised Qui-Gon I would do this. I can't let Qui-Gon down. Because even in the Obi-Wan series, he's still looking for Qui-Gon's approval.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I think it's like, because of Obi-Wan being, indoctrinated into the order for since he was born,
Mm-hmm.
the level of, like, familial love, or partner love, or even friendship love that we all understand, like, there's just a certain capacity that, like, a lifelong Jedi would not be able to understand, except for
Right.
Agreed.
Your occasional, like, your Qui-Gons or your Quinlan Vosses or whoever.
Agreed. Yeah, that I don't think that was part of who and what he was, because it's just not something that was part of the Jedi Order. So he wouldn't have seen
I
it.
feel like so many people who criticize the prequel trilogy specifically, but Star Wars in general, really need to look at it with that sort of looking at the faults of the Jedi not of the individual characters, not of the writing and the producing of the movies, but look at the faults of the Jedi. Look at what they've done.
The system.
How the Jedi destroyed Anakin.
Mhm.
The I don't know, like,
No, the Jedi were supposed to be the good
light when you look at it that way.
Well, they were supposed to be the good guys, but at the same time, they were also destroying the base of their community at the same time while they were doing it.
They're supposed to be the good guys, but they're also the ones who go and kidnap children and take them from their parents and indoctrinate them from a young age with this is the only way that you're allowed to live, but you're not allowed to have connections with people. You're not allowed to have families, love, but you have
removing
to
that base empathy and that base emotion from people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
there's
this,
a lot. There was this. I don't remember what prompted it, but like some very angry people on Twitter were yelling at me because they said that like I had insulted the Jedi Order, and I don't think like this is a very odd thing because like George Lucas himself made 3 movies and 7 seasons of TV saying that like this is clearly not a perfect institution. And I remember like reading some of the comments in there, and I realized that a lot of people don't separate the institution from the faith.
Mm-hmm.
And because they keep them locked together, they find it difficult to criticize like this institution is failing, even if like the core belief system is still the right path.
Right.
And I think like, wow, this is just such an allegory for the real world right now.
It really is. And if you look at, yes, the faith is strong, yes, the core belief of this group is right,
Mm-hmm.
but man is so flawed.
Yeah, and like the fact that like it just it gets to a point where it's just so blinded to their own mistakes because of complacency and lack of self-awareness and things like that. There was like someone asked me like, why am I throwing so much shade on Mace Windu? And I'm like, no, I love Mace Windu, but I'm like, he's powerful, but he's also not very self-aware. None of like the head Jedi are, and that's like that's not throwing shade on Yoda or throwing shade on Mace Windu. It's like this whole hierarchy, like they explicitly say it in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Like they are constantly talking about like, well, should we tell anyone that we're not quite as insightful as we thought we were? So it's interesting. I think like becoming a creative in this franchise and seeing how so many people like they take things kind of out of context from what is presented in like I guess the Bible of the religion, the films themselves.
Yeah.
But I think like it's interesting how like you can probably like tie a lot of lines to like everyone's own like the insecurities that they bring to themselves and then how they interpret those types of things. And you can see like the I guess like my wife would probably joke like the best and worst thing about me is my analytical mind, and you could see how I am like totally breaking down like these relationships and systems in Star Wars. And of course there's probably someone who's just like, just watch the movie and enjoy it, like don't think about it this much. So
yeah, but that for me, that's actually part of the enjoyment, is being able to see those things and how they work and how it's a reflection of our world. And I think that's what a good sci-fi should do, whether it's and I know that admittedly Star Wars is more space fantasy than science fiction, and I'm okay with that. But I still think at times, at a certain level, Star Wars makes you look back at what's going on in our own world and everything else. And that's one of the things I've actually grown to love about Star Trek, is that being a good science fiction property. Like, so for instance, I didn't get to watch it yesterday, but I sat down this morning and watched the new episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds was released on Paramount Plus.
That was amazing.
It's fantastic. And I tell you what, at the end of that episode, yeah, I'm thinking back, looking at the world that we live in and how people interact with one another and looking at it through that perspective. And I think that if you have a well-written science fiction property, it does that. It makes you be reflective on the things that are in your life now and the things that you're hopeful for the future. And that's what Star Trek is. It's hopeful. That's what we're hoping to be, in the future.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
Right.
I feel like definitely when you look deeper into things like that and you realize that when you remember that these characters are people.
Exactly. Yeah. That was really one of my goals with with writing Brotherhood was to like humanize Anakin as much as possible, particularly for people who didn't watch Clone Wars.
Right.
Oh, sure.
But to take like the reality of like what is happening during Attack of the Clones, because a lot of terrible things happen to Anakin really fast.
Yeah.
And it's not like he had the support system to deal with it.
Oh,
So
no.
I really wanted to like put that complexity front and center by placing you in his head and like have you feel like the battle of emotions that he is constantly feeling, and the answer to them, to that battle of emotions from the Jedi is always squash those emotions down, which is never a good thing. Everyone should go to therapy.
Right.
I love therapy. It's been like it's the best part of my week.
But you need to have all of that
That'd be
in.
wonderful.
You need to know Anakin. You need to
Mhm.
to love Anakin, to appreciate Anakin, to fear Vader that much more. That's part of his purpose. Is he's as terrifying as he is because he was this character you used to love.
I think too, like even as much as I watched and rewatched Clone Wars and the prequels and stuff, I always felt like there was a tiny, like a little disconnect between Anakin and Vader.
Mhm.
And I felt like the greatest gift of the Kenobi series was like it unified that so well for me. And so when like I know like in Rebels you have that moment with Ahsoka and Vader with the helmet, but I feel like that like that's a companion piece now to what Obi-Wan does in the finale of the series, and the way that Hayden delivers that, like I am not your failure. And I think back to like what is Anakin's whole thing is he cares so much he basically implodes. And even in that moment Anakin returns for just a fraction of a second to say like, Obi-Wan, I care about you. I'm going to destroy what little remains of myself to alleviate you of this burden.
Yeah,
and
you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did.
So like I think about that scene like every day.
Oh, and I know there was not a single dry eye in my house when we watched that. And when they announced the Obi-Wan series, I'm like, oh, we get to see full strength Vader. We get to see why Vader is as terrifying as he is.
Yeah.
Because his timeline has been so backward because of the way that the movies were released. There's so much between episode 3 and episode 4 of Vader coming to power that we need to see. We need to know why he's as terrifying as he is in episode 4 and why he's the big bad that we all know and love so much.
I'll take a Vader standalone movie.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's interesting that I know some people weren't happy with the fact that we are humanizing Vader, and they're like, he's no longer a badass. I'm like, no, he's a terribly complex badass now. It's like, it's great that you get the Rogue One scene, which I love. It's amazing. It's amazing, but it's like without, I think it has so much more weight the more you fill into that. And I think like as amazing and badass as it is, the greatest gift of all of this post original trilogy material is rewatching like Return of the Jedi. And the hallway scene with Luke and Vader talking has so much weight to it now. And it's like, yes, it's all retconned in, it's all backfilled in, but I don't care. It's still like the best. And watching when we showed my daughter Star Wars, so we did kind of like a machete order where we did 4, 5, 1, 2, some Clone Wars, like about I think like 5 episodes of Clone Wars in the movies, 3, which just completely destroyed her, and then going back to 6, like you could see like her reaction to Vader was so much different when she first watched Return of the Jedi because she knew Anakin. And I think there's a lot of value in that, in getting that sort of character growth.
Yeah.
I could talk about Anakin Skywalker for like 10 hours. So.
Last thing about Anakin, because I love him, Anakin and Vader are, I mean, they will always hold a special place in my heart. Darth Vader is one of the scariest creatures, people, villain that has ever existed.
Did you play the Vader Immortal VR game?
No.
Yes.
So I know, like, I have seen Darth Vader, my entire life, right? the first time he comes into the scene and like he comes towards you and they angle him like just above you and you look up and he's just breathing and there's a stormtrooper with a gun to your head. I'm like, this is one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced in a video game, even
I can
though
imagine.
this is like, these are the characters. Like I have a plushie, stormtrooper in the other room. Like I have a plushie Vader in my daughter's plushie bin. Like, these are not like things that I should be terrified of, but like that presentation of them is like, you are still really freaking scary.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. And just
But-
one last point to add on to all of that conversation about Anakin. Vader is scary because of all the backfilled information. The fact that you can't have a villain be scary if there's no reason to fear him, if you don't have knowledge of why he's scary and all those other things. People fear the Joker in DC because he's off the charts crazy and he does all these crazy things. People feared Thanos because Thanos had the ability and the drive to do the things that he said he was going to do, and he had killed all these people, all like to getting to that. So when he said he was going to do something, they knew it was going to happen. And I firmly believe that in order to have a villain, you have to give him a villainous background, and that's what the prequels did. That's what Clone Wars does. It fills in and infers that information to everything else you watch in Star Wars.
And I love too how much of Anakin's sass and love for dramatic effect they've added.
Yes.
Because Vader is a sassy villain.
Yes.
He has always been. He's always been sassy. But even in the Rogue One scene, when you remember that the lights on Vader's chest have to be on for him to be breathing, he stops breathing to be scary.
Yes.
He shuts off his life support to sneak up on people.
In the Kenobi series, it's the scene with Reva where like he like breaks her lightsaber and just like kind of tosses it to her so you can find. I'm like, that is such an Anakin Skywalker thing to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the way
and
that
the
he was
fact
like,
that he like, I'm pretty sure he uses the Force to make his cape billow. Like, there's no other reason that your cape is billowing other than the fact that you want it to.
yeah,
Yeah.
he would do that.
Oh, absolutely. For sure. All right, Mike, we could honestly, I think we all could sit here and talk nerdy for hours upon hours. You're a lot of fun to talk to. So this has been fun for us, but we're at the point of the show where we finish it off with what we like to call our silly question. So you can answer this as serious or as silly as you would like. One of the things we've noticed by your social media is that you share lots of pictures of your adorable corgi, Lola. Now my family, we also have a corgi. Ours is named Lady Von Strudel Toaster Butt, or just Toast for short. But my question here is, does your corgi also have the judgy eyes, or is that just ours?
Well, so unfortunately, Lola passed in about 2018. She is featured.
Well, I feel like a jerk now.
That's okay. I talk about her all the time. My wife and I have had 4 dogs together. Our most recent passed about 6 months ago. So we've had 2 greyhounds, a mini schnauzer, and Lola the corgi. And Lola was just like, some animals you just have like your bond is like on another level, and that's how I was with Lola. And so that's why there are giant space corgis on the floors of Cato Nemoidia in Star Wars Brotherhood, and why Quark gets a corgi in the Deep Space Nine comic series. In my vampire book, Vampire Weekend, Lola the corgi is Louise the vampire's only companion. Yes, Lola was very sassy. She would always do like these silently judging eyes. And also, like, she was the most food-driven animal I've ever met, and her ability to like learn how to sneak stuff. Like we have a room with the cat food, and we put a little gate in there, and so there's like, it's supposed to be a cat-sized door, like at the bottom. And Lola, what she would do is like she would wait for us to like, close the front door, like when we left, and then start the car and pull out. And then she would go up the stairs, shrink her body down somehow, and squeeze through the cat gate and then eat all the cat food. Like we had to start putting the cat food up. And so one time I came home, like I forgot something, so I pulled out and I pulled back in, and then like I go in, and I took a photo of this to remember it, because Lola is halfway up the stairs and she hears the door open and then she just looks at me. And then like we just kind of look at each other for a little bit and I'm like, I know what you're doing. And then she plops down on the stair like, oh, I was just resting on the stairs. I wasn't actually going
I saw
up the stairs
nothing.
at all. So yeah, that yes, Lola was very sassy and very smart, and I miss her dearly.
Oh, yeah, we love our Corgi. She, if you don't get her what she wants right away, she'll kind of sit down and with her ears back and just kind of
Mhm.
glance up at you like,
The big bright eyes.
oh yeah,
Lola would do the thing like where like if you didn't share your dinner with her, she would come over and then like just put her head in your lap, look straight up, the ears are up, the eyes are wide, and then she just sit there and just kind of like lick her chops constantly.
Yeah.
And then if you did not address her, then she kind of go like, oh, 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 like kind of saying, what the hell?
Oh yeah.
dude, where's mine? Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody else's dog do the just barely audible whine?
Oh, greyhounds actually are like. I remember the first time, like when I met my wife, she had our first greyhound and her mini schnauzer, and so I went over to her apartment for the first time, and then I'm a big dog person like my whole life, so I was like, these dogs are great. I'm gonna marry this woman. But I remember like I was like, what is that weird noise from the other room? And she's like, oh, that's my greyhound. Like they kind of like squeal like pigs when they're upset, and so it was like this.
Oh my gosh.
And I felt like, is that just your dog? She's like, no, all greyhounds do that. And like when we got
so
when
funny.
that greyhound passed, and then about 5 years later, we got another greyhound, and I hear that noise for the first. I'm like, oh, I miss that noise.
No, I have a pit bull chocolate lab mix, and she does this just like you can just barely hear the little. What? I'm like, oh my gosh. Like it just you can just
Just
barely
enough to
hear it.
register.
I'm like, what do you want?
Everything.
Oh goodness. And the answer is usually that she wants to be here.
Yeah.
I need you to give me some space to breathe. Oh goodness. Mike, we have enjoyed our conversation with you so much today. Where can our viewers and our listeners go to find out more about you and your work?
So I am most active on Twitter and whatever Twitter's eventual replacement will be. My handle is Mike Chen Writer. I have claimed that at every social media platform, but none have survived or worked well enough for me to actually leave Twitter yet. We'll see if Blue Sky holds up. I am also that on Instagram. I used to post a lot of photos of my greyhound, but like I don't post that much like in general anymore because I don't know how to use Instagram other than for pet photos.
Fair.
I have a website, mikechenbooks.com. I really need to update it more. I have a Facebook page that was like Facebook/Mike Chen Writer, and like I just gave up on updating it. Like their interface is too hard to use. So that's where they can find me. So yeah, mostly on Twitter. If you want to talk about Deep Space Nine or Anakin Skywalker, or send me pictures of your dogs, I will be very happy to chat with you.
Awesome.
Very
Well, we
cool.
will definitely link your socials, no matter what platform they end up being on.
Exactly. All right, guys, we want to remind you that subscribing is the single most important thing you can do to help our show to continue to grow. Get guests like Mike Chen here to have these awesome conversations and funny moments for you guys to be able to listen to and laugh along with. So please subscribe. It helps us more than we can really say. And, please feel free to check out Mike's work as well. And go check out our Patreon page. There's going to be some cool stuff on there that you're going to want to look at. Anyway, but that's that. But for whatever reason, if you are not happy with the content of our show today, please feel free to lodge your complaint with the head of our complaint department. That is, of course, Miles Edward O'Brien. Miles is very systematic in getting everything off of his itinerary, so we have no doubt that he will process your issue quickly. And since he could make Federation, Bajoran, and sometimes even Romulan technology all cooperate, he should be able to figure out what's wrong with us, and having that diagnosis, find and implement a solution so that Kathleen and I can stop having technical difficulties on days that end with Y.
If anybody could cure me, it would be Miles Edward O'Brien.
If he's not currently being tortured, though, that's always
That's
the
true.
problem. He's captured and tortured a lot.
Poor guy.
Something to look forward to. All right.
Right. Look forward to it. He's the best.
I mean, as far as storylines, I don't look forward to anybody being tortured. Well, maybe Kirk, but that's a whole nother story. But
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you again, Mike.
thanks again, Mike. This has been a lot
Thank you
of
for
fun.
having me.
All right, guys, that's going to conclude us for the FSF Popcast. Goodbye.
Copyright 2023 FSF Popcast.
Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Popcast. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpopcast.com. Original music by Jordan Michaels.